welcome to a brand new episode of Seize the Moment podcast. And today we have a very special guest on. Today we have on Nate Gowdy. He's a Seattle-based documentary photographer, and since 2015, he has photographed upwards of 300 political events and protests across 25 states and Washington, D.C. He was the lone credentialed photographer for Barack Obama and Joe Biden during their respective visits to Seattle. And in June 2016, his portrait of Bernie Sanders made the cover of Time magazine. And his photos have also appeared in Rolling Stone, Mother Jones, Zeit, Courrier International, BuzzFeed News, The Stranger, and CNN. And his newest book, photographing the events of January 6th, is called Insurrection. Welcome, Nate.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely, man. And so as we tend to do, we're going to start off with a quote from Nate's book. And so this one is from Officer Daniel Hodges from the forward of the book. Daniel Hodges wrote, on January 6, 2021, I was fighting back thousands of terrorists attempting to capture or kill members of Congress and the vice president and install Donald Trump as a dictator. I mused to myself, well, if they fail, at least there will be no shortage of evidence. Nowadays, everyone owns a camera that would have been the envy of any photographer a scant few decades past. As the mob laid siege to the United States Capitol, they gleefully made use of theirs. Everyone who wasn't actively assaulting law enforcement or supporting those who were had their smartphones out, taking pictures of themselves, the crowd, and themselves in the crowd, and uploading them to social media. Actually, scratch that. The man who ripped my gas mask off my face and beat me in the head with my own baton while I was being crushed against the doors to the Capitol managed to do both simultaneously. He put his phone in his mouth so that he could both hands free. He had both hands free to assault me, with the steady light from the LED flash casting his twisted visage into sharp relief as he let loose guttural yells. Wow, man. So, I mean, before we even just get into the day itself, which was, I mean, to say the least, captivating, insane, and, kind of whatever adjective you kind of want to use to describe it. Can you first tell us a little bit about your background? So who are you? How did you get into this? And how did you end up there?
Yeah, thanks. I got a camera 12 years ago. I got in with, I'm from Indiana originally. And I fell in with I came to Seattle because it seemed cool, and kind of see something new and exotic compared to Indiana at least. And I found work as a preschool teacher, and meanwhile in my new city I got obsessed with my my little point and shoot camera. So here I am in my hipster jeans, with my keys in one pocket, my wallet in another, and my flip phone and my little point and shoot. And I got obsessed with it, and people were like, well, Nate, you're pretty obsessed, and you're good. You got a good eye. You should learn how to use a real camera. And so in 2011, Christmas 2010, my folks got me a camera for Christmas, and I fell in with Seattle Gay News. And so here I am, a straight guy from Indiana, who suddenly found myself immersed in drag and queer and trans culture and nightlife and the scene. And then just in time, right before marriage equality came to Washington State, the fight for marriage equality. And so I was the one in the room making these photos, and just kind of ran with it. And so, but I've always been drawn to politics. And so in 2015, Bernie Sanders came to Seattle in August, and I photographed that day, and it didn't go as planned. He was interrupted by Black Lives Matter demonstrators, and it became national news. And here I was, and I photographed the scene. And a few days, I blogged about it, and a few days later, Time magazine editor reached out, and here I'd done photojournalism for Seattle Gay News, but never national photojournalism, and a lot of my coverage for Seattle Gay News was community coverage subsidized by them. It was event photography more so a lot of people smiling for the camera, but also real candid, true moments. And so anyway, Time magazine reached out, and that kind of like, wow, okay, and so it gave me the confidence to spend what little I had and to book trips to the early primary states, New Hampshire and Iowa. And here I am in Iowa, driving between cornfields and then hanging out with right wingers, and I was having a ball. And I found out I really liked it. Something's wrong with me. And so basically, and here, so I kept doing it. And my dad's like, how are you paying for this? And I was like, I have just enough, and it's happening now. I thought that the whole MAGA thing was a blip. And I thought I have to photograph this weird, these weird bubbles of toxic Americana before it's gone, because before we have our first female president inaugurated, and I thought that would be the book, the 2016 election campaign. And so here I was sleeping in rental cars, doing whatever I had to do to get by, and to get these photos. And what drew me to it was campaign rallies are staged, they're theatrical, they're contained environments. And so there's a safety in that. There's also an expectation of having your photo taken, in these spaces. And so that, because I've never been the street photographer, I'm not good at approaching people who are just kind of going along their lives on the street. It's like I'll see photos that I won't take, and so I don't quite, if I have to, I can. But basically, they love the politics because you had these politicians and leaders who are followed so rabidly by their supporters, and you get very real emotions, that you're documenting in these contained environments. Well, then we didn't get the inauguration of the first woman president, and here we are. All the politics spilled out into the streets, anti-Trump protests, and then Proud Boy demonstrations, and just across the full spectrum. And here I am in the streets, which I never intended this going that way. And it's just been years of that, and they become violent. And so I've seen, I've been to 30 Trump rallies, or upwards of that now. In time for January 6th, I've been to 30 Trump rallies and appearances, and another 20 MAGA adjacent demonstrations. And so I've seen my fair share of you name it. And so I knew January 6th would be stupid, to be frank, but I didn't know it would be. I didn't see it becoming deadly.
Yeah, because so most of for our audience, maybe some of them who kind of don't know about this. So most of these protests usually don't really go anywhere. It's maybe like a couple of hundred people. They're shouting a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of disunity. There's not really much going on, and there's not really much of a goal, right? As there really wasn't on the 6th, obviously. So the thinking here is like, okay, these people are going to show up. They're going to make a lot of noise, and then they're going to go home. So when you decided, okay, I'm going to photograph this, what was your thinking? Why did you think? Okay, first of all, what did you think would happen? And then second of all, why did you think it was a good idea to do so?
Yeah, so I thought this project series started with me thinking it was just going to be the 2016 presidential election, and here I am still following the story. Where's this going? And I figured, well, I'll do what I set out to do, and this tomb of the visual chronicle of this political era will end when we have a new president inaugurated. And here we were. Biden was going to be inaugurated in 2 weeks, and I figured, here's one last chance to photograph, this MAGA, Trump, before he's irrelevant, hopefully. And I thought it was his last stand, his supporters' last stand in support of him, and so I had missed, and also I had missed Charlottesville. And the weird person I am, that was hard for me, because that was a big part of the story in this timeline, and the big plot point. And I'd missed it because I'd been in Seattle area photographing a friend's beautiful wedding that day. And when it happened, all I could think of was, well, geez, I should have been there. Should have been in Charlottesville. And so I think I was happy to be there. I think, getting that part of the story, closing out the story, actually, or rather. And so I was enthused to be there, but it was the end of my story, end of my, that I had to share, I figured. And I didn't know it would be its own thing in itself, of course.
What was the progression like? Like, I imagine you show up to the event, you see a giant crowd of people, you think it's going to be this, the usual sort of MAGA get together, or Trump rally, essentially. But when you started to see things kind of heat up, what was that like from your perspective, especially while photographing the events there?
Yeah, what were like the sparks? I would say that too. Like how did it sort of escalate? Yeah.
Sure. So I actually never made it to the crowd. I heard them in the distance at the ellipse, but I was, here I'd been coming off a few days in Atlanta covering the historic Senate runoffs. That election had been on January 5th. And so then I flew into the DC metro area and I got into my friends really late the night before, and I was tired. And so I was running a little late that morning, and I heard the cheers of people in the distance, but I just walking past the Capitol and toward the Washington Monument when I ran into a huge gang of militiamen, and I didn't know if it was a mixture of Oath Keepers and 3%ers and Proud Boys, but immediately I recognized the front man with a bullhorn. It was Ethan Nordine, who was a Seattle area Proud Boy I'd photographed numerous times. And so I figured, so here I am, I'm thinking I've photographed these guys before. And I felt a false sense of safety in that, usually they're very aware of optics and public, reception to them. And so basically you're generally reluctant to attack members of the media with cameras. Mm-hmm. And they've always seemed to kind of, at least in my experience, they kind of have like the Chismo code of conduct where they if you don't invade their personal space, they'll respect yours. Mm-hmm. And so whereas they're a fight club and they love confrontation, but a lot of times in my experience, they weren't the ones physically initiating it. They were instigating it, but they weren't, but they would bait the other person to kind of maybe initiate it. And so I felt safe, and I stood my ground, and here are hundreds of these militants are marching around me, and I'm right in the middle of them. If I'd have known where that day was going, I wouldn't have done that. And so I came upon them around 10:35 or so ish. And that morning, and it took almost exactly 10 minutes for them to attack me. One lunged at me, and I backed up and put my arms up, basically saying, "Hey, I'm no threat," and I.
Wait, Nate, just to be clear, was this a Proud Boy or something else?
Yeah, these were all Proud Boys.
Okay.
Yep. And this was a Proud Boy, and so he was on the fringes of the mob, and they attacked me. And then in the photos in the book, you can see the other ones kind of in the wings, ready to pounce in case it escalated. And I announced myself as I'm Rolling Stone photojournalist, and of course they come back with wisecracks, and they're like, "Oh, I'm with Rolling Stone," and making fun of me and yelling Antifa and fake news, and then relaying my coordinates among the group, my position respective to them. Wow. And they were very organized, and this was a loose formation contingent. And right away I knew this day was going to be different because they've already attacked me. And so, I kept my distance from there for a while until other photojournalists were in tow. I was the first non-embedded documentarian with them that morning. There was later I found out, at the first January 6th select committee hearing, there was a British documentary embedded with them and his team, but I for all I knew, those people with cameras were Proud Boys. Right. And so they marched and they did some photo ops in front of the east front of the Capitol, and then they did pre-war prayer. They all kneeled and prayed on what they were about to do, they're asking for God's blessing. That was scary. And then they took more photos at the East Front and marched to just after noon. They arrived at a line of food stands along Constitution Avenue and took a lunch break. And, so here it's just afternoon. Yeah. I've been attacked once, and I'm standing in line behind armed insurgents for a hot dog.
That's insane. It's I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Real Men with Jim Belushi and John Ritter. Oh, so it's a Cold War comedy. So it's insane. So it's like the Soviets are essentially attacking both John Ritter and Jim Belushi, right? And then all of a sudden everything stops, and John Ritter's character is like, "What happened?" And he's like, "Oh no, come on." And Jim Belushi's like, "We can go." And he's like, what happened to all the firing?" And he's like, no, it's lunchtime. And he's like, what? He's like, you're telling me we're in a shootout and they're up to lunch? And he's like, well, yeah, they gotta eat. So it's a comedy. It's literally a fucking comedy. That's insane.
Yeah, no, I kind of like, I don't know where this day is going, but I'm gonna get a hot dog too, because I don't know when it's gonna end and when I'm gonna get to eat. And so yeah, they're men wearing ballistic helmets and flak jackets and stuff, all mingling around these food trucks. And so that was more or less over under 40 minutes. And then they get into formation again, and faces harden, and something's different. And so follow them, and they march and they're chanting, and meanwhile the energy is getting more and more palpable. I mean, this adrenaline is off the charts. And I'm with the front men. I'm near them, and so they march to the Peace Monument, and that's where the insurrection started. Basically, it's at the northwest approach to the Capitol grounds, and it's just like a high school pep rally gone way wrong. I mean, it's just battle cries, surging adrenaline. You're all crushed together. And now I watch the footage, and it's like, holy moly, should have been more fearful than I was. And when I watched the New York Times documentary Day of Rage, I actually spot myself in the video, in the footage, standing right next to the first person to approach that barricade and who started it all. And then of course I went back and looked to see if I had any photos of this guy, and I didn't, because he was next to me as opposed to in front of my camera. And so, but I was basically right there with the leaders. And so it happened. But I have the Capitol to my back, and I look out, and I just see a sea of people. All these other Trumpsters have glommed onto this, these militants leading them. And so I just couldn't believe how many people. And Trump, this was 12:50. After 12:50, I mean, Trump didn't finish speaking until 1:15. So they've all left early, the rally early, and kind of following the militants. And so it happened so fast. It's incredible how fast it happened, how fast it escalated. And the 5 police patrols who were ill-equipped were swiftly overpowered. One woman was knocked out. One police officer was knocked out. And I'm distracted by all these people, old and young alike, crossing these downed bike rack barriers. Wow. And I'm distracted by them, because that's where they become, they go from, people exercising their First Amendment rights to crossing a hard line and becoming insurrectionists. They're trespassing on the Capitol grounds while democracy is happening inside. And so I'm attacked again. A man points at me, his face is concealed, and he declares "F you," and shoves me from a 3-foot balustrade at the base of a set of stairs leading toward the Capitol building. And I was okay. I'm a good follower, but other people were helping me up and apologizing for his actions, because there a lot of people are just normal, as normal as they can be, Trump supporters, protesting, and they don't know what's happening either. They're in just as much shock as I am. And so, but they're following, they're going along with it. And so anyway, so that's when, so this was around right before 1 p.m. And this is when it all started. And by now I'm no longer at the front of the pack, because I've been attacked and had to take my time to gather myself.
Mm-hmm. So this is going to sound like a really stupid question, but it's on the forefront of my mind. It's you must be, are you used to being in dangerous situations as a photojournalist? Because I would imagine, you get attacked even once, it's like the the feeling of even wanting to stay there, it makes you want to, kind of
run away.
right? And then you see that things are heating up even more. You don't know what's going to happen next, essentially, especially after being attacked the second time. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah, what motivated you to continue?
Yeah.
Well, you kind of fall into survival mode. I'm actually quite cautious. I've been to a lot of iffy kind of situations in this, and yet I never right in the middle of the hand-to-hand combat and between authorities and right wingers or leftists. And I'm always pretty kind of, I've never broken a bone in my life. I'm a pretty cautious guy. And so, if I have to, I'll use a telephoto. And so this was, I'd been attacked once before. But this was different, because as cautious as I am, and the only thing othering me are my cameras and my N95 mask. We have to remember this was the deadliest day of the pandemic up till that point. There was no vaccine. On January 6, 2021, there were 4,000 reported COVID-related deaths in this country. And so that was happening. And so, but otherwise, other than my mask and cameras, I'm a white dude. And so, and this 90% of this or more of these people were white. And so, and I'm wearing a maroon hoodie and a tan Carhartt beanie. And so I look a lot like them, like they do. And I'm from the Midwest. I can go into that mode a little bit,
Right.
or a lot of it, I that's where I grew up. And so basically around these people. And so I blend in a fair amount because, whereas a lot of my colleagues in the press were militarized and head to toe protective gear. They're wearing gas masks, goggles, even have their, badges announcing their press, which I would never do in this kind of crowd. That's just plain dangerous. And, because they've been taught by Brett, their dear leader that journalists are the enemy of the people, and he said it over and over the years. And so I'm not, I don't remember feeling afraid. I remember I think, and now in retrospect, I feel like I was probably mixing. I felt excitement. And I think that I was there, that I wasn't missing it. And I think I was perhaps confusing excitement, or, excitement and fear.
Right.
I think it's easy to do. And I think that, I kind of, but, that said, I turned my flash off. So I was more discreet. And the majority of the images in the book were taken either with outstretched arms, where I'm pointing my camera over here, but looking over here, pretending to still be searching for photos, because I don't want them to see me making the photos, because, and I'm also shooting from the hip a lot, and so, I'm trying to be as discreet as possible because they are watching me. While, some of them mistake me as, one of them, just another soldier for the cause. Just as many aren't 100% sure about me. And so I'm being monitored closely, and they're especially triggered by when photographers take pictures of them in vulnerable situations. So this was war. I mean, this was a conflict zone. You're crushed between people. You can't move. It's really hard to navigate. You can't just like, oh, I'm going to go over there. It's like you're just stuck between this mound, anyway. And so I forgot where I was going, but basically it's it's just something else. And sorry, I forgot.
No, the motivation, right? So the motivation to kind of continue, right? So I'm assuming at that point there was a part of you that understood that this was going to be a historical event.
Yeah. Well, certainly the strangest. I mean, I'm at the inauguration day stand has been invaded, and it's still under construction. I've read that it had just been they just finished painting it, and it's all this scaffolding, and I'd been there. I'd been in the space, almost 4 years before, when I was at Donald Trump's inauguration. So it was very strange, surreal being in this, this rarefied historic space where, known for stately pomp and circumstance and decorum and dignitaries, and I'd been here when Trump had put his hand on the Lincoln Bible and pledged to defend the Constitution, but also spoke of and warned about societal doom and gloom and American carnage. And it was a really dark speech. And well, here I am in this space again for the first time since, and this man's literally manifested American carnage. I mean, it was just, but I still didn't know it was deadly. I saw fighting, but I just thought it was stupid. It's just like, this is ridiculous. What is, and everyone around me is, they're just psyched. They're I heard it a million times that day where they're like, God, this is the best day of my life. This is one for the history books. We're making history 17 and in the lineage of 1776.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to ask this question, but I also don't want to put you in a difficult legal position. So please feel free to disregard it altogether. Okay. The kind of understanding now is that Trump incited the insurrection. And then obviously people like Alex Jones are also given some responsibility or credit for it as well. But I mean, in terms of what you saw, was anybody actively looking at tweets and saying, okay, we should do this or we should do that? Yeah. Okay.
They were very spurred by, during lunchtime, they, in their huddles while they're eating tacos and hot dogs, they were listening to Trump, the live stream of the speech. And so, so his tweets were making a difference on the ground right there. I mean, I didn't have, my cell reception and data was terrible because it's like being at a music fest that, you're in the middle of a mob where everyone's on their phone. And so I didn't have any, everyone at home watching, everyone watching knew more than I did on the ground, much more than I did. And so, but yeah, people are reading this, and for example, at 2:30 when he tweeted that Mike Pence was a coward and should have done more, that's what they're right there with him, and they're chanting "Hang Mike Pence."
Wow.
What was it? What was it like when, for example, when you're seeing those people, for example, the people who helped you up after you were attacked the second time, right? Who were like, oh, I even apologizing for the people who attacked you. What's it like to have seen them still kind of go with the crowd or even make that decision still? Like, they're like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, I just kind of came here to just kind of show up and give support, just kind of like a morale sort of a boost thing, as opposed to actually taking physical action, especially on the level that they took.
Yeah, it's a good question.
So there's a lot of people, who the militants, I think, I've heard they call these other Trump supporters the normies, and their job was to corral the normies and then rile them up. It was much like how the fascists in the 1930s fomented mob violence. Basically, the Proud Boys aren't wearing their identifiable colors. They're known for their black and yellow Fred Perry polos that they wear and such. And they weren't dressed in that today. They were in, incognito, as one of their leaders put it. And but that said, they did have a lot of them had neon orange stocking caps on, and so they could kind of identify each other more discreetly. And that day they got these otherwise normal people to participate and follow their lead, and they just kind of went with the flow, and the Proud Boys were involved in every one of the 8 breaches of the building, the interior of the building that day, and that's a New York Times. That's their research and work that they've done, that that's how I know that. Anyway, so you have these people who are, a lot of people are, they see me and they're not making out that I'm not on their team, so to speak. And so they're, I had a man who was, making sure I didn't fall off the retaining wall and, kind of on encircling the Inauguration Day stage. And, and then I had people, there it was a very windy day. And so there were caustic chemicals throughout, all over in the breeze, and chemical irritants had infiltrated the air everywhere. And I actually felt a little smug that, I had an N95 and could breathe just fine. But that said, I didn't have any protection for my eyes. And so my eyes were irritated. So people helped me out with water and eye drops. They had repurposed the barricades as ladders up the retaining wall. And, and they're helping people get up because they needed more people at the front lines. People would get compromised by tear gas or such, and they'd fall back, and then you'd have another wave of men, and you have people yelling, "Hold the line," and another round of fresh patriots, and it was
Wow.
It was very organized and the camaraderie was off the charts. It was just basically a huge sense of these people were like, we're saving them, we're saving our country, and they genuinely believe this, well, along with all the, I don't think there was I think they were all, I think the vast majority of them subscribed to QAnon. I heard conspiracies that I had, I'm pretty engaged in this stuff, and I heard conspiracy theories I wasn't even familiar with at the time.
Oh, any examples?
I was, because of I didn't have that much familiarity at the time. I don't recall them very well. It was just like, what the, this is bonkers, so I'm sorry to say it's not fresh in my mind, but it was like, what, and what are you talking about? Like, holy moly. I mean, they were convinced, a lot of us, cell reception was bad. And so for one, they were convinced that big tech was censoring them, was silencing them, and wouldn't let them online because of who they were.
Yeah. It's interesting when we think about kind of the conspiracy aspect of it. So we had Michael Shermer on, who's, the expert on the conspiracy theorists, I would say, on the show a couple of months ago. And so we talked about, especially QAnon, and we talked about how kind of there's a sort of an intersection between sort of the fear that people have of just the world and mistrust and paranoia, and obviously how they interpret that in specific events. So, the kind of understanding here is like the deep state is pretty much an understanding of the world as being unsafe. And, sort of these authority figures don't have my best interests at heart. And, kind of whatever else that obviously goes into that. I don't want to get into this too much. Obviously, for the audience, you guys are welcome to kind of watch the show that we did with Shermer. But my thinking here is that it's kind of really hard to dislike these people, because when you hear them talk, it's also understandable that this is severe mental illness, man. And this is how severe mental illness manifests. Like, these people are, first of all, genuinely scared. And then second of all, they literally believe that they're saving the world. It's like, if you thought, okay, their motivations were selfish, you would think, oh, okay, like they're just assholes and they're kind of rationalizing or whatever. But it doesn't, maybe that is happening, but it doesn't really seem like that's what they're doing. They genuinely believe they're doing not only something historically great for their community, but also historically good for the country. And so, you kind of look at this and you go, oh my God, man, if I could just maybe talk to you for like a couple of hours, maybe we could find a way to resolve this.
I used to hope that, but they fashion themselves as freedom fighters.
Yeah.
And they're sick. And, when I started making photos documenting MAGA movement and the rise of, this right-wing extremism in this country and Trump, and I thought I would be, my intentions were closer to making photos of these people I totally I'm not aligned with, but I kept saying to myself, and from what I was seeing at these rallies, people are people, and they're very, I've met a lot of nice people, and who view themselves as good, decent people, citizens. And so my photos, my favorite images were the ones where maybe people on different ends of the spectrum, we could kind of see them and maybe have a little empathy for them and a little kind of see where they're coming from a little better, understand them a little better. And from what I found is these pictures, in my pictures, we all see what we want to see, or that's what we're doing, at least. Basically these photos that were meant to be kind of to bridge that divide do the opposite, because people project their own views onto my images. Yeah. And so so if you have a picture of a Trump rally, the crowd watching, one end of the spectrum, they'll be like, well, we got people participating in the democratic process, involving themselves and their families for the good of their community. And the other end will see, the other side will see, well, look at that toxic Americana and that just cesspool of bigotry and racism and toxic masculinity and all the things, and so, and as I've continued going to these rallies, it's just getting worse and worse, and the rhetoric gets worse, and Trump is stoking their fears. That's his game. And so basically it's just, I see these people on January 6th as they're just gone. And it doesn't matter what we say to them or what we show them or what, how many of my pictures we show them, they're not going to change their minds. Yeah. Even just the word insurrection is triggering to them. And that was the inspiration for me doing this book. Mm-hmm. Of one day of photos versus the whole political era, which I hope to get to hopefully someday, sooner than later. But basically, my then partner's father, she had warned me when I was meeting her parents, don't talk politics, and redirect him when he tries to, because mm-hmm. he will try to challenge you all day. And I did a great job until dinner time, and we're at an Italian restaurant. And he mentioned the insurrection and how it was a Fedsurrection or whatever, you name it. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey man, I was there. I was at the insurrection. I took photos. And he immediately lost it. His voice boomed and he's like, what insurrection? And the whole restaurant, it was packed, and they're all looking in our direction. And that was from then on, it was on. I was, basically the whole wait staff I could see in my periphery, we're all nodding, we're in Seattle. They're all nodding whenever I say something. And then he's blowing up and emotional. And the person he is, I pick up the tab, we leave, and it just evolves from there. And it may not have helped my relationship, but it definitely, solidified my resolve to make this book and to make something that, hey, people need to see this. I have photos, I have evidence, and just look, does this look like 20-year-old black bloc leftists? No, this is or what these are 30 to 60-year-old middle-aged white people who with beards and aviators and all the stereotypes, and they're out to save their country.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Shermer would agree with you. He would pretty much say, like, yeah, that subsection, which is, I mean, relatively small, I guess, if you want to compare it to, the mass population. But, like, those people are lost, right? They're kind of lost causes. The people that you're actually pretty much targeting in terms of evidence, factual sort of type thinking, critical thinking, is probably the people who helped you up.
The people who might, and just kind of the few people in the Trump administration stuff who did resign and did take a stand, and the Liz Cheneys and the Adam Kinzingers, the people who I don't agree with on anything, I don't believe, but I do believe they have integrity, and people who, just want, it's little by little, it does make an impact, but I don't know. I hope it makes an impact on those people. But most of the people who are buying, all the people buying my book obviously know what really happened that day. But I like the fact that they're showing their friends and they're giving people a way to tangibly experience that event in ways they haven't yet. We've seen the same wire images over and over with stories online, and we've seen footage. And it's just chaos. And so I set out to, I wanted to not only kind of show my experience from a firsthand account, of that day, but also I spent months just researching and filling my head with everything I could, lots of Atlantic articles, and just kind of reading all I could, so I would get the facts right. And this could be a true and honest accounting, because in my captions I state, I'm saying, okay, I'm seeing this is what's in front of my lens, but also this is happening, not in front of my lens, elsewhere. And so I'm progressing the timeline and basically synthesizing lots of information into a digestible account, much the way the J6 committee did, which their work was masterful. I mean, and making sense of just a lot of different plot points and aspects. And so I'm trying to use the book as a teacher, not only a first draft of history, but something that people can kind of start to grasp how this day went, because a lot of people, it's hard for them to engage with that day. I mean, I feel like the insurrection guy. I'm always talking about it, and I love opportunities like this to expound upon it. But a lot of times, my daily life, I'm not really able to have discussions about it, because we've been under so much duress for all these years. I mean, Donald Trump's been punching us through the Overton window for years,
Yep.
and people are tired and they're in survival mode, and they don't want to talk about that. And so it's hard to. So try to do it in a way that they can kind of, I used each image as like to contextualize a different part of that day. Like one image, it's of the 3%ers. Well, who are the 3%ers? A lot of people can't answer that question, and what is QAnon? Same, and so I use different pictures in the narrative, time-stamped images to say, okay, this is who this is. And these are what these people believe, and so on and so forth. And aspects of that day that I haven't seen in the mainstream media. I thought for sure later in that day, when they were chanting, after Ashley Babbitt, the Air Force veteran, was shot inside by security, taking a stand, for once that day, they the crowd, the mob outside, raised their arms and started chanting an Eric Garner tribute.
Wow.
I can't breathe. They're out there chanting I can't breathe, and their goal in a lot of this is always to antagonize the libs, and it was bizarre. And then right after that, I'm hearing from loudspeakers, which I don't know where the loudspeakers are, but I'm hearing Queen's "We Will Rock You" booming, blaring, around this inauguration day stage. And it was just the most surreal thing. And I wish I'm just basically really, taken with still photography, and that's what I'm out to do. But I thought for sure I'd see footage of this, and I haven't seen that yet, and so I should have done video, and I meant to wear a GoPro that day. But for safety reasons, if anything, but I screwed up and forgot my memory card for it. So man, I'm really regretful there, because that footage would be, it'd be worth a lot. Just to have. I'm not talking monetarily necessarily even.
No, for sure. But honestly, I mean, the fact that video footage doesn't exist, I mean, wouldn't you say that the fact that you were able to capture it in photography has incredible value anyway? Because there's things that video cameras can capture for sure. You get an idea of the context of the events, but sometimes, kind of like what you said, like sometimes people will look at a photograph and two people will see different things, right? They'll capture different meaning from it, right? And that might not necessarily be a good thing. That could be like a double-edged sword, right? But from another perspective, it's also like it tells like this whole story. It's kind of like when you read a book, you don't have the images, but you might put images onto what it is that you're reading. I don't know.
And it also gives you time to think about too, as opposed to video. I mean, you're going to watch a 10-second clip and you're probably going to move on. Whereas if you're looking at a photo, especially there was a really great one that you had. So it was one of the more vulnerable ones where the guy was looking down and he looked kind of sullen. And yeah, it makes you like kind of sit back for a couple of minutes and think about, like, first of all, what's going on through this guy's head and what the hell just happened?
Yeah, it's weird. It's the attention. It's different. It's a different quality of attention, right? Like when you're watching a video, it's almost telling you what to look at. But when you're looking at a photo, you almost are working with it and trying to work out what's going on.
Yeah, I understand. Right.
Yeah.
You get to experience it, at your leisure, and at your pace. And it basically, books are, I found that, it boggles my mind that this is the first and to date, as far as my knowledge, and I've looked far and wide, the only book of photojournalism of that day. out that's available, and that's bonkers to me. That the Washington Post, with all their incredible Pulitzer Prize reporting, could have easily manifested a book or something, and they've done incredible interactive interactive pieces online, but basically it's like, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of potential reasons, but no one with the means decided to do this book. So it's crazy. It's astonishing to me that this guy from Seattle is the only one who thought to do it,
Wow.
and it's like, what is going on here? Because I think, and what I found with the first run of the book, the soft cover that came out in July or in September, it sold out within my network through word of mouth, over 600 books. And it's not a cheap book. And so what I found was people really do have a desire to have something they can just sit with, and even as hard as it is, and then show their friends, and make change that way. And so it's just strange to me. And so that, I've photographed over 300 of these things, and the first book is just one day of images. I mean, that day was just on a whole nother level of out there.
Right.
What would, sorry, my bad. What would you say is the most maybe impactful photo that you took, at least most impactful to you?
Yeah, good question. Great question. The photos that, I think the sense of, it's hard to name one. There's 124 images in the book, from start to finish. I was there with the militants from the start, but I think, the first image that stuck out to me was the one where this guy next to me, when it was all starting around 1:13 p.m., basically thought I was taking pictures for the cause, and he stuck his stuck his middle finger up as a one finger salute, facing the Capitol. And I have this image of this, a lot of people mistook the hand and the finger as mine. Obviously not. So sometimes it delivers the wrong message.
Yeah, it did seem like that. It did seem like that it was yours. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's this man his name was Stephen Fender. I have a quote with him next to the photo, but that's how these people felt that day. And so that's representative of that afternoon for me. And then other photos that stand out are the immediacy of the danger of when the guy attacked me, when I was attacked the second time, and he's pointing into my lens. And just this guy with a ball cap with an American flag on it, and the striped red and white striped bandana around his face, obscuring his face. I think the immediacy of the danger, I think that's affected people. I think there's a photo from like 12:55 when it's all starting, and the crowd, not all of whom are militants, many of them are not, there's this shock on this woman's face. And I think that's the first image that I've noticed grabs a lot of people, because she just looks in shock, like, what is happening? Yeah. And then there's a photo you mentioned where this man, he's draped in a flag. He's been hit with pepper spray or something, and he's reeling. I mean, basically it looks like he's sitting there sobbing or crying, and he probably is crying, but not but because he's been compromised. He's been and so he's, it's this really kind of humanizing moment. It's kind of like as Michael Rowe in the introduction describes, it's Goya-esque, and it's kind of composition. It's strangely, grotesquely beautiful to me. And that photo that you mentioned, that's probably my favorite image, but it's not one that I've noticed a lot of people gravitate to.
Yeah, that was the one that actually struck out. It stuck out to me the most. Yeah, what struck me the most.
And of course, the other, I think probably the most, in the end, years from now, the most iconic image that I got was around 5:07 when I'm standing from the Crow's Nest media scaffolding at the center of the scene. I'd kind of, my hands were so numb, so I had army crawled up the ladder.
The blurry photo, right?
What's that?
The blurry photo, right?
It's not blurry. No, not this one. No, no, there's one. Yeah. And there's one blurry photo that shows the kind of mayhem, the experience of flashbangs going off and everything. But basically, no, this is a photo near the end of the day once the police have taken, Virginia State Police reinforcements had arrived, and they were finally going on the offensive. And I just got the whole scene with the Capitol dome in it, and pepper spray and tear gas smoke everywhere, and kind of it's chaos. And that photo, I think, in the end will be, because I know a lot of brave photojournalists who were right there at the battle for the tunnel on the inaugural platform, and where police, they didn't know the building had been breached otherwise, and they were that was the Capitol's last stand. They for all they knew, they were the only one in between the interior and these thousands of people outside. And that's where Daniel Hodges, who wrote my forward, that's where he was in the viral video being crushed in the doorways, and so that was the worst of the fighting happened. I mean, it was medieval combat in there. I mean, people ask me, "Oh, did you see any weapons?" And I tell them, well, gosh, I saw people using anything and everything was a weapon that day. I mean, they were incorporated. Yeah, just pieces from the construction site. I saw a lot of bear mace visible on their, and stuff. But basically, you name it, it was a weapon, that could be used to hurt somebody. And so, and the police at the same time, I've never seen it. I'm from Seattle, where confrontations between demonstrators and police have been really well. When I'm at a protest here in the Pacific Northwest, you got leftists, you got the right wingers, and you got the authorities. And mostly, I'm most fearful of the authorities, because they're the ones with weapons that can kill you, and they're known to target journalists. I have a 74-year-old friend who's a Vietnam vet who likes to go and record with his camera, and older man who's one day he was shot 4 times. When you're shot 4 times, that's no accident. They're targeting you. And so, but on this day, in Portland too, I've been to stuff in Portland too, which is off the wall.
That's another level. Yeah. That's something completely different.
Yeah. And so, here today at this, the police, law enforcement had their kid gloves on. They weren't prepared, and they didn't even have riot shields. Was there a point where you thought, oh my God, is this ever going to end? I was kind of, well, when I climbed that scaffolding, once finally authorities went on the offensive, I, my phone for the first time all day started pinging with, because I was up high, I guess, but it started pinging with news alerts and concerned texts. And so I had a stranger take a photo of me, and I took a moment for myself from the bog of sea creatures below, or swamp creatures, excuse me.
You gotta drain them.
Dig here and there, because there was I have this image of this woman holding this sign up. She's yelling, and it's the signs drains the swamp. And it's like, woman, you are the swamp, like, holy moly. And so but I took a moment to myself to kind of gather myself. But here, I'm dehydrated. I haven't eaten I've only had a hot dog for hours, and on your feet in the cold, and these chemicals in the air, and kind of looking over your shoulder all day. And so I wasn't, it appeared it was about to end, but I was there for the duration. But, and this is around when police took the offensive. It was around close to 5 o'clock. It really died down by 6:30 p.m. and it was dark, and I had a several mile walk to my friend's place. And I had a night ahead of me of editing these photos to turn them around for Rolling Stone to publish the next day. And so I had a lot more to go. And so I knew going into this that, I was in for an all-nighter and stuff, because my images, a lot of the images you see from that day are gently toned color images, technically brilliant. My colleagues, in the industry are very good at what they do. But as a freelancer who doesn't primarily work as a photojournalist, it's my job to make images I haven't seen before, and to put my stamp on them, style aesthetically. And that's why mine, compared to most you'll see, are over processed. They're black and white, which strips the color and lets you really see this, the people, what's happening in these. It's less distracting, in my opinion. but also these, they're very stark and high contrast. And so, and my, it's my job to make pictures that are different than all the rest that are out there. And I think it, if you put a ton of images from that day on a wall, you'll be able to tell which ones are mine. And that's the point.
Yeah. And so I want to ask,
awesome.
wait, do you want to?
I'm sure, but no, go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
So I want to ask, so from one of our frequent guests, our homie Liz Derval. So I want to ask a question from her. So Liz asks, from what you witnessed on January 6th, did it fundamentally change your beliefs about American society and the stability of our institutions?
After Hillary Clinton's election night loss years before, that was a time I've just never experienced shock like that. I was confident she would win, things would be okay, and I didn't do my job that night. I wasn't equipped for that shock, and so I felt like, how can I I felt like exploitive photographing people going through it, crying when I was one of them, and so it was just so. It took days to, I got goosebumps just talking about it just now, and basically. So I don't know that I'll ever be shocked like that again, and if I am shocked, like January 6th was shocking, I'll be able to do my job. And that said, after seeing like this, and I think that wasn't what scared me about what's to come. It was the Republican Party's response to it. I thought we'd all be in agreement that this is not okay and Trump should be impeached and he'd be done for, and they might, maybe circle back to sanity. And no, they've doubled down and on all the, misleading, false disinformation about that day. And they've just continued to rile up their base and with what's happened with the Supreme Court, it's a judicial coup. I think things are going to get a lot worse before they might get better. I think I guess my view is I'm not optimistic at all, and so many of us have been through so much that it's been normalized. It's like Hillary Clinton was supposed to shatter that glass ceiling. Instead, like I said earlier, Trump's punched us through the Overton window every day, and we just can't even see how, a lot of people can't even see how bonkers these times are. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
No, for sure. And I guess maybe this will be the last question. Sure. In your opinion, how important is it for photojournalists to be present during historic events like the January 6th insurrection?
Well, as Officer Hodges says in the forward, without photojournalists and documentarians there that afternoon, there's a wealth of an abundance of surveillance footage and iPhone footage from that day, but it would all be through the lens of celebration. Yep. Instead of telling this story, it would and I think that's the big difference between what I was there doing and everyone else with their phones out recording. It's just kind of a lot of people rail against big media, but I really think photojournalists these days are survivors. The industry is not in good shape, and if you're doing it, you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you have to do it. You're just drawn to it in a way that this is your passion. And in the 80s, up till the 80s, photographers were rock stars in society, and people knew their names. And
Almost Famous comes to mind. Of course, yeah.
And I think that's less so now. And so I think, but I think people, they rail against this abstract big media, and because they don't trust, the corporations that own the news and stuff necessarily. And I think people want something. People know me. They know what I'm very open about who I am and what I'm about and where I'm coming from. And my photos are honest, and I photograph the left the same as I photograph the right. I don't change how I see suddenly, when I go out. And sure, it's subjective and I have a viewpoint, but I think that's more important than ever because, one side's off the rails and the other, other side's the only thing, in between us and that, you know, and I think so what I was saying was I think I God, I start talking and I lose myself.
Well, yeah.
No,
So
I'm with
my,
you. I feel like it tells the real story of what's happening there. It's not like somebody necessarily spinning a narrative, right? Which could be easily done. Like a big event like that happens. After it happens, I mean, people are going to tell stories of it. They're going to
have interpretations.
have different interpretations, right? But you get somebody who's actually there taking photos and be able to see what really happened there. Of course, again, back to
it's still objective. I mean,
it's still objective. Yeah, we went back to that part where one, you know, two people are going to see one photo, you know, differently, right?
Yeah.
But still, the idea, it's so important to be there and capture the events, right? Without somebody who has this
agenda.
Well, yeah, who's trying to? It's not like a gotcha moment, you know, where Nate's like, "Oh, I'm just like waiting for the perfect moment to strike." And that's what I really appreciated about your photos. That like there was such a sympathetic touch to them that it didn't seem like you were just waiting for these people to do something stupid, like have some sort of blooper, and to say, "Oh, this is what these people are like. See what I told you guys." You know, yeah. So I love that. So I think the idea here is that when you look at your book and you look at the photographs, there's no sense that, you know, Nate is coming out there trying to even obviously, though the term insurrection is used, I think that's the objective term. So even though that is the term used, I don't think that there's a kind of an ulterior motive there to make these people look bad. I think there was more of an understanding of what's going on. And again, even the term insurrection there is just, again, I know people are going to disagree with this, but it's used objectively because that's legit what it was. I'm sorry. So
No, thank you. I think, you know, I tell people, I would like to remind people, it's really easy to make anybody look bad with photos. It's easy, meaning it's easy to take bad photos. A lot of people do it. It's like why I have a job.
Yeah,
you know,
like the National Enquirer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's to make unflattering photos. And when these people say, "Oh, which fake news are you with?" and and I'm like, guys, I'm just seeing what I see. That's just how you look. It's just how you look. You know, I'm not trying to be flattering, unflattering. You know, and I'm really love doing this documentary work because you know, in my day-to-day livelihood, my job is to make all my clients look good. And I'm very good at doing that. That's why they come to me. But when I'm at these events, I get to kind of see what I see and appreciate the art and moments that otherwise, you know, well, and moments that tell the story. And so it's just kind of quite a kind of surreal and just weird that we're here talking about this right now. And I guess I'll be out there, you know, my dad, you know, I'll get depressed about the times we're living in, and my dad on the phone will remind me, "Hey, Nate, you know, well, the effed up silver lining is you'll be there to make photos of it, of all this dysfunction around us." So
I love that. And so just before we wrap up, I have to ask, what was it like working with Obama and Biden?
Yeah, so so when I was a photographer, it was fall of 2013, and I had you know, I was on my business cards I had drag queens. I was a drag queen photographer. I was known as people called me Seattle's gay photographer. You know, straight guy from Indiana. And so because I was so often I photographed hundreds of events, and I was so often only the only person in the room with a camera. And it was mine, all this colorful cast of, it was like a pride procession of characters, you know, every day, every night. And so I was a drag queen photographer, but I dedicated myself to documenting the marriage equality movement here in Washington State. And so people who appreciated my efforts with that connected me with the DNC. And you know, I got an email one night. I'd come back from the Bear Bar, you know, inebriated, and basically at 3 a.m. I checked my email, and it's an email saying, "Hey, someone referred us to you. If you want to be our guy photographing President Obama in 1 week, the gig is yours." Wow. And so that was my first time wearing a suit. And it was me and 24 CEOs and tribal leaders in a small room. And it was just, you know, they'd each paid $16,000 a pop to be there. And here all of a sudden I'm in a suit for the first time. And I get to move around. And Obama, you know, it was during the government shutdown in 2013. And so he looked exhausted, and he literally had his hand in his face. And I'd never seen images of him doing that. And I have a really good one. But anyway, they're asking him like, what do you want your legacy to be, and so on and so forth. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he knows you support him. You just gave him all this money. Ask him something he can handle it. Ask him about drone strikes, or ask him about there's so much we could, Guantanamo, closing Guantanamo, and so much. And he won't take it personally, obviously. And so it was rather, the questions were not great, but it was what an experience. And at the end, he didn't look, he was tired. And then at the end, they wanted me to take a picture of him and the caterers, and he just perked up, was smiling huge, because real people, and that who didn't expect to get a photo with him. It was just kind of the host to think of them, and so basically, and people had told me, well, you need to ask him for a photo if you're able. And so I said, sir, can I get a photo too? And he looks at me and he just fucking lights up. And he lights up and he, grinning ear to ear. And he's like, first, I'm going to make you look good. And so the president of the world walks behind me, and my camera strap had messed up my jacket, and he fixes my collar. Wow. and takes a photo of me. And it's just like, I don't know, it just made for a memorable experience. And then after that, someone has to see my photos, and my camera memory card had glitched. And so it said error, no photos.
Oh man.
And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've lost my photos. And luckily I was able to, software recovery worked, and I'll never understand it, but all my cards, I don't know if it's some Secret Service thing or what. This is my own conspiracy theory, but all my cards that I took to that event, all my CF cards did not work after that.
Wow.
They were all corrupted. And it's like, and I only used one card. And so it's like, I'll forever be confused about what happened with that.
Okay. Wow,
anyway,
speaking of tech issues, we had the New York City mayor on and lost the entire episode. Lost it. It was just gone. Literally gone. Imagine now texting. Imagine now texting.
That was actually my fault.
Yeah. Imagine texting his deputy and saying like, "Hey, I know we just interviewed the mayor or whatnot, but like, the episode is gone." She was,
You know what? Just for fun, I'll tell you. So here's what happened. We just get finished Zoom, just like that.
No, we're using another.
Okay, it's done. Leon goes to this couch, lays down, relaxes, and he's like, that was a pretty good episode, right? I'm like, yeah, it's great. And I'm looking through my computer, literally have my hand on the mouse, looking at the screen over here. And then I'm going to the file, and then I already see the file size is smaller than it should be. So I'm like, okay, no, whatever. Okay, double click it, start to play it. It's just the first 30 seconds of us introing him.
Oh my God.
No, not even 30 seconds. It's just a minute of being like, oh, I'm so happy to be on your podcast. This is great.
Yeah.
And it was actually like a 30-minute interview that did not get recorded at all.
Yeah. And it was a good interview. It was so fun to do it. He was like, hey guys.
It was.
It's like, oh, it's the mayor. It's the mayor.
The banger.
Thank you so much. But thankfully for him, or for us, but thankfully, for having him, he actually redid the interview with us. And actually the second time around, it was much better the second time around. So this was actually like a month before the Black Lives Matter protest, like after George Floyd. So literally the conversation was really fun, but it was like pretty lighthearted. And then as soon as he came back after the BLM protest, like that conversation was stellar, way better than the first one.
Oh, good.
Because COVID.
And I know we're ready to wrap up, but basically I didn't mention how these photos my photos from January 6th were almost lost.
Wow.
I actually 2 days later, I was just fatigued and tired, and I was at Union Station, and I was talking to my father on the phone. We were real close, and then I realized I was late for my train to Baltimore to catch my flight out back to Seattle, and I got up without my backpack, and my backpack had my computer and my hard drives and my camera in there, and basically I got back, I rushed back. It'd been 2-3 minutes and it was gone. Wow. And so basically there were the 25 medium res JPEGs that had been sent to Rolling Stone and published, but otherwise the rest, these would have been all lost. And so long story short, Well, that was the real trauma for me. I mean, a lot of people have very real traumas from January 6th, and I don't, I'm still processing, obviously, but I don't know. The trauma for me was losing my images. I would have given an arm or a leg to get them back in that moment, and I was devastated. Most historic thing I've ever witnessed, and gone. And the end of my book, and so basically, 2 days later, an acquaintance on social media tracked it down to the online marketplace, OfferUp, the website OfferUp, when I didn't even know that existed. And he found my camera. It was a banged up. It looked like it had been to war, because I'm pretty hard on it. And most Leicas are pristine. And long story short, the Amtrak police were very above and beyond helpful. But the trick had to lure the thieves back to the scene of the crime, because Amtrak police only have jurisdiction on Amtrak property. And so luckily they answered, and I threw a Hail Mary and said, hey, that's actually my camera that you have, and it's not worth anything because it's banged up, and you're not gonna make any, but it's worth a lot to me, and more importantly, the photos. And so I got them on the phone, and they were basically very manipulative. I didn't dislike them, but very like, oh, praise be to God that he brought us together, and that we can extort, and that was the quote. But then, the not part of the quote was, so we can extort you for $2,000.
Right.
And so, and come together and help each other. And so anyway, my friend, I'd left DC already. My friend, police helped him arrange a safe and successful sting operation. And basically he met with them, and all my stuff was recovered 4 days later. And you know how it goes usually when, musicians or artists or photographers get their gear stolen, it's a needle in the haystack. It's gone. And so anyway, so that was just a really
that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah, and like, wow, such a great endpoint. Like, holy shit, man, what the story that almost never was. So, all right, Alan, before we wrap up, any final questions for Nate?
Oh yes. So if we wanted to follow your work, and of course buy the book, where could we do that?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking. It's listed on Amazon, but I don't like to help out Amazon more than I have to. And and I'll tell you, their back end's been the most miserable online experience I've ever had. Their back end for vendors. And so I encourage people to go right to my website at www.nategowdy, NATEGOWY.com, and buy it directly from the author. The books are literally being bound as we speak. So they're being finished up the printer in New Jersey, and they'll ship hopefully sooner than later this month in January. And so I have a 6x8 edition, a 9x11 edition. So a smaller one, which I prefer the cute little edition, but a lot of people obviously gravitate toward the large format coffee table book. And so yeah, thanks for asking. And this is it's scary to me doing something like this, because this was a way to finally, hopefully support this work I'm so into doing, and so I can do more of it and make it, and monetize it, and because I've been doing it, self-assigned and self-funded for years, and so this was a way to, curate that as something tangible, and I hope it's a model for many more books. Because I certainly got the images, and it's scary. I've printed 1,500 of these books, and they're selling, but I got a lot more books to sell. So tell all your friends.
No, and I'm assuming that those photos will end up in textbooks in the future. So that's going to be great for you.
I have no doubt. I have, they're all the Museum of Fine Arts Houston has already bought a copy of the book, and they're on it. But yeah, that'll be interesting. It's always interesting to kind of see how these images are incorporated. After this first draft of history.
Thank you so much for coming on, man.
So
this was
man.
such a great story, man, and just such an exhilarating episode.
Hey, yeah, really, really, really appreciate meeting you guys, and I'll keep listening. I keep doing what you're doing. I really enjoyed listening to what I have so far, and really, thankful for meeting you. So thank you.
Absolutely, we're happy to know you too, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Okay. Yep.
All right. See you.
All right, that was awesome. So, everyone, if you'd like to follow us, you can follow us at Seize the Moment Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. We're at Seize_podcast. Like, subscribe,
Hit the bell on YouTube.
And again, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.